parimargit vayam, has to be searched out. Yasmin, where? Gataha, going. Na, never. Nivartanti, they come back. Bhuyaha, again. Tam, to him. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Adyam, original. Purusham, personality of Godhead. Prapadye, surrender. Yataha, from whom? Pravritihi, the beginning. Prashritya, extended. Purani, very old. So translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time and memorial. The purport. It is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world, since the root is upwards. The extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the material expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet, one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father, and my father is the son of such and such a person, etc. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbha Dakshayi Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the end of research work. One has to search out the origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from the false reflection of reality. And by knowledge, one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. The word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures. One must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, the first thing one must do is to surrender unto Him. The description of that place whence, having gone, one never returns to this false reflected tree is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain the favor of that Personality of Godhead, one only has to surrender. And this is the result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, etc. He is the cause of the extension of this material world. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham sarvasya prabhavam. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, one becomes detached automatically from this extension, material extension. So maybe everybody we can repeat the translation after me. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began, and from whom everything has extended since time and memorial. So we'll just say a few prayers to invoke the blessings of the Vaishnavas. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Miritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusite Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So thank you very much for joining us today at Bhaktivedanta Manor. I would like to pray to all the senior Vaishnavas, all the senior devotees who are present here for their blessings, that we can say something which is inspirational, motivational to everybody. And I also want to thank the organizers for allowing me to say a few words today. Please excuse any mistakes or offenses that I may commit whilst giving this class. So the topic today is Krishna wants us to think independently. Now, when I was looking at what to speak about for this particular topic, I was thinking about, okay, well, Krishna wants us to think independently, but what does that really mean? What do we want to think independently from? What is it that we want to be independent from? So we find in this world, when we're kind of going about our daily lives, that we're so much engrossed in what's going on in our day-to-day life. Our thoughts are constantly absorbed in our family, in our work, and sometimes we're occasionally encouraged or want to come to the temple. But we're very much entangled in the reflection of this banyan tree. And so I chose this verse from the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita because here Krishna is talking about, in this section of the Bhagavad Gita, how the material world is the reflection of a banyan tree on a lake. And so what we find is that the spiritual world is the actual banyan tree. So it's the banyan tree in reality. And then this material world is the reflection of that. So everything that exists in this material world is already existing in the spiritual world, but Srila Prabhupada refers to it as a perverted reflection. And so love in the spiritual world becomes lust in the material world. And so many things like this, where we find that in the spiritual world we find the most pure version of these different qualities, but when it comes to the material world, it actually becomes very much different and very much self-motivated. And so what we want to try to do here is we want to try to understand how can we really get out of the banyan tree? How can we get out of this entanglement where we're thinking to be a part of the reflected banyan tree and start to access that real banyan tree? So here in Srila Prabhupada's purports, he gives us a few hints. So I'll come to the purport of the verse itself in a little bit later, but from verse number 1, I want to read to you something which I thought was very handy for us to help us to understand how we can actually start to become independent from the material world. So we can see, so here Srila Prabhupada, this is a quote from his purport. We can see that the trees on the bank reflected upon the water with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as the tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material world. So here we can see that Srila Prabhupada is making an important point to all of us, that everything is based on the desire. What is our desire to achieve in this world? What is our desire to do in this world? What is our desire for our activities? And when we desire for our own sense gratification, that's when we start to find that we're operating in the material sphere. We become very much lost in the banyan tree, and we cannot understand what the spiritual reality is actually going to be. But when we desire to please Krishna's senses, that's when we can actually see that we're starting to manifest that spiritual reality. That spiritual reality, that banyan tree, starts to become present in our lives much more. Because, why is that the case? It's because we're actually serving the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we act in this service, in this selfless service, then we're able to understand that Krishna is the center of all of our lives. Krishna is the person for whom which we should be doing everything for. In our reflection, we find that there's no substance. You know, when we see our reflection in a mirror, it is actually just a piece of glass there. You cannot reach out and touch yourself, your reflection in the mirror. And in the same way, what we find is that sometimes if there is a sun which is reflected in the water, it doesn't have the same qualities as the original sun itself. It doesn't emanate any heat for us. And what we find is that actually it has the qualities of water where it's actually reflected in. And sometimes the water can be cold, in fact. And so we find that reflections are actually insubstantial and they cannot give us real satisfaction. So we need to find something which doesn't merely look like the sun. It doesn't merely appear to be something which it is not. And so Srila Prabhupada talks about this as well in his purport to verse 1 for the 15th chapter. He says, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. So we need to be able to detach ourselves from our material activities to a certain extent, but then we, as human beings, we have this natural propensity to desire to do something. We need to be engaged in some service. And so therefore, when we detach, we must also attach ourselves. We must also reattach ourselves to something. And so therefore we must, Srila Prabhupada is saying to us, that we must get attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. And so Krishna is kind of helping us to engage in this process of devotional service because he wants us to invest our attention, he wants us to invest our energy into something which is more substantial, into something which is more meaningful. And why is this the case? Krishna also talks about the nature of the person, our true identity. And so when he speaks about the nature of our true identity, he says that, you know, we are Satchidananda, the soul, basically. And we have the same qualities that he has. And so we must therefore change our desires. The soul has these desires to engage in activities which are eternal, which are going to give us happiness, which are also spiritual. And actually, His Holiness Keshav Maharaj writes in the Gita 3 one thing which I really thought was quite interesting when I was studying this. And he says that fairy tales have told us that everyone lived happily ever after. And actually this is hinting towards that spiritual reality. Everyone is living, so that's the chit aspect. Everyone is happy, that's the ananda aspect. And ever after, that is the eternal, that's the sat aspect of the soul. Okay, so we've talked about how it's important that we need to be able to understand what we need to become independent from, what we need to detach ourselves from. But how can we actually remove our dependence on the material world? What is it that we can actually do to detach ourselves in an effective way from this material world? So this is where we come to our verse today, and verse and purport today. So in today's purport, we read some very important things about how we can actually remove our dependence from this material world. So here I want to read one quote to you. The attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such a discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada is giving us what I like to call the Holy Trinity here. In Christianity we have this concept of the Holy Trinity. But Srila Prabhupada is giving us also a different kind of type of Krishna-conscious Holy Trinity. So here, the first thing is the Shastra, the authorized scriptures, so that we can read and understand and study the books in order to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. Then there is the Guru, so the spiritual master, the person who is actually in knowledge of Krishna. They're able to give us Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the definition of the Guru is one who is in knowledge of Krishna, one who knows about Krishna, and one who is able to share Krishna with us. So the Shastra, the authorized scriptures, the Guru, the person who's in knowledge of Krishna, and finally there is the sadhus, the association of the devotees with whom which we can have a discussion. And then if we engage in the devotional service by reading the Shastra, following the instructions of the Guru, and associating with the sadhus, that's when we can actually attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is almost like a triangle formula that we can use when we're practicing our spiritual life. Sometimes we might read something in the authorized books, but we're not sure how we can apply it in our lives. So sometimes we can go to the Guru and we can ask them, okay, dear Guru Maharaj, I read this, and I'm trying to understand how can I apply this in my life. And so the Guru might give us some instructions in how we can actually apply this in our lives. They might say, try to do this. Maybe try to chant your japa more attentively, or maybe you try to engage in some devotional service. That will develop the sense of humility in our heart. But then maybe we're struggling to follow this instruction of the Guru. Maybe we're trying to find some service which helps us to develop this sense of humility, but we really can't do it. And therefore we go to the association of the devotees. We go to the association of the sadhus, and we speak to them. We open our hearts to them. We tell them what we're thinking, what we're struggling with, and they're also able to help us. And maybe sometimes we're not sure, okay, this devotee, he said this one thing to me. Maybe I should go and check. Did Srila Prabhupada say this in his books? Does the Shastra also say this? So what we find is that we can use this triangle to go deeper into our spiritual life. We can use this triangle to start to remove the dependence on the material world. Because ultimately these three things, the Shastra, the Guru, and the sadhus, They want to help us to deepen our spiritual life. They want to help us to progress in our spiritual life. And so that's why we use this Holy Trinity to help us to move forward. Later in his purport to this particular verse, Srila Prabhupada says, to gain the favor of the personality of Godhead, one only has to surrender. And this is the result of performing devotional service by hearing and chanting, etc. So throughout the world, we find that there are people who are more beautiful than us, more successful than us, more knowledgeable than us, even those who are more wealthy than us. But if we identify ourselves with those things, those temporary material things, then we'll find that when we come across these people, it will start to pinch our false ego. We'll feel a bit of pain in our heart. Some stabbing is there. Why does this person look so beautiful? Why can't I be so beautiful like this person? You know, I did the same thing that my colleague did, but somehow he managed to get a promotion and I didn't. So there is some pain in our heart at the success and the beauty of others when we identify with these temporary material things. But there's one way that we can get free of this pain, and that is to start to identify with something which is much more than these temporary material things. The ego, the real identity lies in the selfless servant, becoming the selfless servant of God. And the best way that we can actually become the servant of God is by engaging in his devotional service. So here in this quote that I just read to you, Srila Prabhupada is giving us a chance and some tips and some activities that we can do which are actually devotional service. And then when we do this, we can actually attain the favor of the Lord. And then when we attain the favor of the Lord, why will we even need to desire for beauty and wealth and fame? We're favored by the Lord. We don't need these temporary material things. Imagine being blessed by Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda themselves and knowing that they are on your side. Then there is no need, there's no desire, because all of these things will come naturally. All of these things will come as a subsequent consequence of their blessings. So Srila Prabhupada has given us a tip here. He said, one only has to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing and chanting. Okay, sometimes surrender, Krishna asks us to surrender in the Bhagavad Gita. That's quite difficult for us these days. Surrender means to give up everything almost. That's what we think of in our mind. But Srila Prabhupada says that surrender comes as a result of performing devotional service by hearing and chanting. Okay, so let's understand, what is hearing and chanting? What is he referring to here? So Srila Prabhupada is actually referring to a verse that comes from Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll quickly read the verse for you. It's from the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 5, verse 23 and 24. So Sri Prahlad Maharaj is speaking to his father, Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyakashipu has asked him, Prahlad, what did you learn in school? What was the best thing that you learned in school? And so this is what Prahlad Maharaj says. Shri Prahlad Vacha Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atma Nivedanam Itipam Spar Sarpita Vishnu Bhaktis Chenavalakshana Kriyeta Bhagavatyadha Tanmanye Dhitam Uttamam. So the translation by Srila Prabhupada. Prahlad Maharaj said, hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia and pastimes of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto him. In other words, serving him with body, mind and words. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. One who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these 9 methods should be understood to be the most learned person, for he has acquired complete knowledge. So here, this is the full verse which Srila Prabhupada is actually referring to in his purport here. He gives us all of the 9 processes of devotional service, and he tells us that actually one who has dedicated his life to the service of Krishna through these methods, these 9 methods, actually has acquired complete knowledge. Okay, so where do we have to... Let's come back to the topic of today. Krishna wants us to think independently. Okay, so we've said, okay, we need to be independent from the material world. How do we become independent from the material world? By engaging in devotional service. Okay, so what is devotional service in these 9 processes of bhakti? So we have to be able to use our intelligence to be able to understand how we can apply these principles of devotional service. Srila Prabhupada said in a lecture that I was listening to this week, that if we simply practice one of these processes of devotional service, then we're also able to attain the perfection or the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He later goes on in that lecture to emphasize that hearing and chanting are actually the most important, because in this Kali Yuga, this is the prescribed method that is given by Lord Chaitanya. So let's maybe chant one Mahamantra together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So there we go. We just did that. That was the process, hearing and chanting. Even right now, we're doing this hearing and chanting. We are sitting and chanting the glories of the Lord, and you all are hearing about the glories of the Lord as well. So actually Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadev Goswami were the perfections of this particular process, because they were able to have this conversation, this Srimad Bhagavatam, and Maharaj Parikshit was able to be the best listener, and Sukadev Goswami was able to be the best reciter. So, from this purport in Srimad Bhagavatam, this verse that I just read to you, Srila Prabhupada gives us many, many different things. He actually goes into a lot of detail about each of the 9 processes. He gives us tips and little tricks as to how we can apply them in our lives. But I want to share with you a couple of things from here. So Srila Prabhupada says, one sincere endeavor to perform these 9 processes of devotional service is technically called bhakti. The word adha means directly. One should act for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu, not for the satisfaction of his own senses. That is the meaning of the word adha, directly. So at the beginning of the lecture today, we spoke about how when we are serving our own senses, when we are performing sense gratification for ourselves, that's when we become in the reflected banyan tree. That's when we start to act in the material world. But when we serve the Lord directly here, Srila Prabhupada is using and emphasizing the word directly, that's when we're actually able to attain to that spiritual reality. There's also one important point, one thing that I thought was really nice from this particular excerpt that I just read to you. One's sincere endeavor to perform. So that's a key part of this. You know, each of the 9 processes of devotional service can be sometimes quite difficult, but we just need to make a sincere endeavor. Krishna is ultimately looking for our sincerity. And there are many examples that we can see of this in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, Gajendra the elephant, he employed his intelligence. He understood that he was not going to win the fight with the crocodile. He was not going to win that particular battle. So he used his intelligence to offer a lotus flower unto the Lord and therefore surrender unto the Lord. And by doing so, he was able to attain the Lord himself. This is an elephant, ultimately, at the end of the day. So he made a sincere effort and he understood, yes, at this moment in time, I need to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And later in this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes Srila Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotional service, Anya Bilashita Sunyam. And he actually then goes on to say, the Gopal Tapani Upanishad says that the word bhakti means engagement in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead not of anyone else. This Upanishad describes that bhakti is an offering of devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we can understand from this particular section of the purport that we must employ our intelligence to serve the Supreme Lord directly and in a way that's pleasing and favorable. In Srila Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotional service, he uses these words in a way that's favorable to the Supreme Lord. Not that we just do whatever we want and we are maybe doing some kind of motivated devotional service. Rupa Goswami defines it as without any conception of karma and gyan. So without any desire for fruitive results or the gaining of any knowledge. We're just doing it for the Lord. My Lord, I've cooked this preparation for you and I want to offer it to you with all of the love that I have in my heart. Now we can see that the half curtain is up on the altar. So the Pujari has taken what the cook has offered and he's offered it. He's offered it with love. He's like, my Lord, this offering is just for you. We are going to honor it after you've taken your prasadam, but this offering is just for you. It's cooked in ghee, it's very rich, it's full of beautiful delectables, but this offering is just for you. And actually, Lord Krishna also tells us to try to do this in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in this famous verse, Patram Pushpam Phalantoyam. In this verse, he actually uses bhakti twice. Now, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to repeat himself just in the Bhagavad Gita is a big thing. But to repeat himself twice in the same verse, that must mean that it's really important for us to understand. And so bhakti, when we are doing our devotional service, is a key part of it. Our Guru Maharaj gave a lecture earlier this year, and he was encouraging us to have moments of bhakti. He was encouraging us to do activities which are solely dedicated to Lord Krishna. Maybe that's just one round of japa every day. Maybe that's just one holy name even every day. Or maybe that's 5 minutes of reading every day. Whatever that thing might be for you, do that thing for Krishna. Do that thing for Krishna and do it with love. Do it with some feeling so that we are engaging in bhakti. So like I mentioned, this purport is really nice. Srila Prabhupada extensively goes into a lot of detail. And I'll just give you the reference one more time if you'd like to read it in your own time. So this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, verses 23 and 24. Okay, so I just want to bring everything together. So today we spoke about how Krishna wants us to use our intelligence independently, to think independently. So we need to think independently from the material world. This material world is ultimately a reflection of the banyan tree, the spiritual reality. So we need to become independent from this material reflection, and we need to access that spiritual reality, that real tree. How can we do this? How can we start to remove our dependence from this material world? So in today's verse, we read in Srila Prabhupada's purport that we can do this through the Holy Trinity, the Guru, the Sadhus, and the Shastra, and we can do this by performing devotional service. Okay, what were those principles of devotional service? Those principles of devotional services were 9 processes of devotional service. Hearing and chanting being the main parts of devotional service. And we did a mantra together, so we realized that actually this process of hearing and chanting is very easy. And then finally, what does it mean? Where do we want to how do we want to apply these principles of devotional service? We want to apply them in such a way that we have these moments of bhakti that are directly for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'll pause here. And I'll see if there are any questions or any comments that anyone would like to share or have. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for a very nice and inspirational lecture. I just have one question, as you mentioned about this moments of bhakti, and when you mentioned about when we chant like one round or hear about the glories of God, do it for Krishna. Somehow to me it sounds like counterintuitive because ultimately that's what benefits us. Because Krishna is like supreme. He doesn't need anything, right? So, how really we should make it like, uh, as you say, like really coming from the heart, doing for Krishna. But I feel like other way around that it's actually kind of obviously for us. Then how can we say that we are doing that for Krishna?
So, what is it that we gain from performing these acts of devotional service? What is it that we actually attain when we perform these acts of devotional service? When we are chanting the holy names of the Lord, for example, we are gaining access to Krishna himself. You know, Srila Prabhupada talks about the equivalence principle, how Krishna's name, Krishna's form, pastimes, they're all the same. So when we are engaging in such a relationship with the Lord, what does Krishna feel? Krishna feels very much grateful. And so by feeling this feeling of gratitude, we actually gain Krishna's mercy. And that's what we are gaining. But as we progress in devotional service, we don't want to gain anything actually. We realize that we just want to serve Krishna. Whether Krishna is giving us his mercy, whether Krishna is not giving us his mercy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks about this. He doesn't want anything from Krishna. He doesn't want fame. He doesn't want a beautiful wife. He doesn't want followers. Na dhanam, na janam, and nothing. Completely renouncing everything. He just wants to serve Krishna. And so why is that mood there in the devotee? Why does the devotee have this mood in the first place? Because when we are thinking about when we want to love someone or when we want to be grateful to someone, we want to do something for them. We want to reciprocate with them in some way. You know, Krishna has given us so much already. You know, Krishna has given us the air that we breathe. Krishna has given us the food that we eat. He accepts our cooking ultimately. I mean, can you imagine, like, I know for myself, like, I really struggle to cook without measuring my spices. So, like, it's not perfect. It's not going to be as tasteful as, you know, what Srimati Radharani might cook for him. It's not going to be as loving as what Srimati Radharani or Mother Yashoda might cook for him in the spiritual world. Krishna doesn't need my cooking. But if I offer that cooking with some love, Krishna is looking for the love. Krishna is looking for the relationship, because when we engage in that relationship, then we gain his mercy. So we might not think, okay, yes, this is for Krishna. And yes, we can chant like that. We might think, okay, let me just chant Hare Krishna because I get fearlessness from chanting. You know, I get some of Krishna's mercy. It makes me very happy. Do that, 100% do that, because it's always good to chant Krishna's holy name. And then we might, as we progress in our spiritual life, as we engage in this Holy Trinity, as we talk to the Guru, as we read the Shastra, as we talk to the devotees, the sadhus, we'll start to understand that actually a higher process of devotional service is to just offer the love, is to just give Krishna what he wants, just to do something for him, just to have those moments of bhakti. I hope that answers your question. Hare Krishna. What other questions do you all have? Okay, we have about 7 minutes left. So what I'll do is I'll share with you one last thing. And we talked about how we can, what these 9 processes of devotional service are. But the last thing is actually how can we apply these 9 processes of devotional service? Is there something in Krishna consciousness which helps us to understand how we can apply these processes? Because sometimes it's quite difficult. You know, in the scriptures, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's so much knowledge in there. But how can we actually apply it? So there's a process which is described, and it's a 4-step process. So the first one is Shravanam, to hear or read about something, whether it's to hear a lecture from an authoritative source or to read something from the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita, to hear something. And then, so that's Shravanam. And then it's Mananam. So Mananam means to think or to contemplate. How is this relevant in my life? How is this relevant for me right now? So thinking and contemplating. And then the third step is Nididhyasanam. So how can we apply this principle in our life right now? What can we do right now? Say, I found one sentence in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We need to develop devotional service in the mood of humility. Okay, what does this mean for me right now? How can I apply it? And then the last step is Vandanam. So we are small, we are very insignificant in our service to the Lord. So we need to pray. We need to pray for strength and empowerment, that when I make an endeavor to apply this principle that I found in the scriptures, that we can be successful in our endeavor, that we can really attain to the success that we are hoping to achieve. So 4 steps to apply the 9 processes of devotional service: hearing and reading. So we are putting the food in our mouth. Mananam, thinking and contemplating. We are chewing. We are trying to understand, how is this relevant to me right now? Then we are swallowing. We are thinking about how we can apply this principle. We are applying this principle. And then finally we're doing the digestion. So we're praying for the strength and empowerment. So we'll thank you all very much. We hope that this has been somewhat inspiring and motivating for you to go deeper in your Krishna consciousness. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai. Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. Is it okay?
They just wanted the kids to come and stand. Yeah, which is what I was going to do.
Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda Radha Gokula Nanda Shri Radha Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda Radha Gokula Nanda Shri Radha Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Godanitai 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 Jaya Godanitai Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Nidai Gaura Hari Hari Gaura Hari Shiva Jaya Jaya Hora Chande Arati Kashyapa Shiva Jaya Jaya Hora Chande Jana Vidasabhanye Jagamanadava Dakhinita Mamegada Dakhinita Mamegada Vasa Jada Nika Jaya Shini Vasa Jada Ragna Simmasane Vase Age Orata Ragna Simmasane Chamaradula Sanjaya Bhato Bhattacharya Sanjaya Bhattacharya Baje gada da Bahu kore yanda jene vadana ura Gandhajini Badana Ujjvala Gada Dejavana Mala Gauri Janmala Gada Dejavana Mala Gauri Janmala Yoga Nara Jara Demegada Dada Bhakti Vinoda Gora Rasambhada Bhakti Vinoda Gora Rasambhada Shiva Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arati Tajara Shiva Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arati Tajara Namo Vishaya Krishna Vishaya Hotale Adi Bhakti Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Varavani Charine Nishesharunati Vajadari Shatari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare. Again. Hare Rama, Rama Rama. One more time. Hare Krishna, Hare one last time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Shri Radhe. Hare Bol, Nitai Gaura Hare Bol.
अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी महाराज शिल प्रभुपाद की इस्कॉन बीबीटी फाउंडर शिल प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नाम आचार्य शिल हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की अयोध्यापुरी धाम की मायापुर नवद्वीप धाम की गंगा माई यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे Oh glories to the assembled devotees. Oh glories to the assembled devotees. Oh glories to the assembled devotees. Oh glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada ki. Please do remain seated. We're going to conclude the Aarti ceremony by offering pranams, prayers unto Lord Nrsimhadev, and then we're going to have a couple of important announcements. So please do stay with us. We're continuing with our program here in the temple room.
Narsingamade Sharanam Prapade Tavakara Kamalavare Naka Adhuta Shinga Lalita Hiranya Kashipu Kano Brinda Bhagavad ki, Prahlad Maharaj ki.
Hare Krishna. Sorry, I couldn't hear you guys. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. It's much better. Thank you everyone for coming this evening to Bhaktivedanta Mana. The next darshan will be at 9 o'clock, so please do stick around. In the meantime, there's prasadam being served in the Haveli, so if you haven't done so already, please do take some prasadam. We'll also be having some kirtans, and we'll just be setting up under this picture of Panchatattva. So please do give us a couple of minutes while we set up, and please do stay with us for the night. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you again very soon. Hare Krishna.